What is up everybody, 24/7 Bricks here, welcome back to a brand new video, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a mini mock series overview. This will be the overview of season 2, so please like, share and subscribe, and let's get into it. So jumping straight into the first episode, this is episode 1 of season 2. This was the first mini mock of the season, and in this mock I decided to do a base. And this was my first time trying to actually build some sort of base, but I think this one turned out really nicely. There is a lot of details that I used in this mock, and there was a lot of minifigures that I didn't think that I would actually use in a mock itself. So as you can see, there is a lot of details. There's sort of 2 layers to it. So you have like a ground sort of layer, and then you have like sort of a maintenance catwalk layer, which I think turned out quite nicely. As you can see there is a lot of crates, as well as a lot of piping and detail work for like electrical or gas work or cooling systems. I really do like how the piping worked out in the top right of the mock, and I also really like how I used the snot technique for the door on the second level. As you can see, I used a couple of engineers and officers as well as pilots, which I never thought I'd actually use in a mini mock, but I think they turned out quite nicely and they look really cool and just give it a little bit more colour and a little bit more detail in the mock. Another thing that I really liked about the mock was the colours that I introduced. So because the main colour palette was grey and light grey, I didn't really have any other colours in there, so I decided to do some yellow outlining as well as some red and yellow piping. I also decided to add a couple of printed control panels in there just to give it a little bit more detail and a little bit more colour. Overall, I think this mock turned out really nicely, and I just do like the way it turned out in general as a first sort of base build. Moving on, this is episode 2 of the mini mock series. Now, in this video, I wanted to do a bunker, and I wanted the clones to be rushing it, and I wanted to also make the landscape look like there had been a battle waging for a really long period of time, and I really captured that with using the brown and the darker colours, which really gave the look of the terrain being constantly mangled by warfare. Following this, I also wanted to display the look of warfare and to really enhance the mock itself and to give it a little bit more colour other than the dark browns and the dark greens and the dark tans. So I decided to experiment with explosions, and I decided to add a explosion up on the top of the bunker that was probably shot off by a rocket launcher or something, or a grenade, as the clones are trying to rush the bunker. Following this, I didn't just want to leave it as a plain mock, I did want to add in some plants and stuff like that. So I did add in a few dark orangey plants on the bunker, on the ground, as well as some small brown twigs that are sticking up to make it look like there were plants there, or that they've been decimated by the conflict going on. But overall, this mock turned out really nicely. I just love how it looks, and I may do something of a larger scale version of this mock in the future, because I just really love the way it just looks and the way it stands out. Moving on, this is episode 3. Now I do have to say episode 3 is a bit of a plain mock, however I did want to do some sort of Highlands build as I was experimenting with colour palettes, and I really like how this one turned out in terms of the colour and the techniques that I used to make the slope on the mountain face. However, I do have to say this mock is very plain. As you can see here, the Jedi General is facing off against either an Inquisitor or a rogue Sith Lord, and it just looks very plain in general, but I did decide to add a couple plants. This is not one of my favourite mocks I've done so far, however it is nice just to have a look at all the colours and all the techniques that were used in this mock. As you can see, I used the light grey and the sand green. I did have a lot of these 2x2 sand green corner pieces, so if you see a lot of them, the reason is because I went to a pick a brick store and I got a bunch of them, but they are quite useful and it did turn out quite nicely with all these slopes. However, like I said, pretty plain, pretty boring, not really much going on, and it's not one of my favourites. Next, moving on, we have episode 4. Now in this mini mock, I wanted to experiment with some water as well as a tree technique that I saw online. Now, I did take some inspiration from episode 2 with some of the landscaping, but the main piece of this mock is the tree that I think turned out really nicely. I used a couple of rods as well as some flexible rods to actually make the trunk of the tree, and in actual fact I think there was only one connection point for the whole tree. Everything else was just held together by the flexible rods. Moving on, the colour palette for the actual brush of the tree was an autumn vibe. I really like the fact that I used the dark orange as well as lighter yellow and orange colours to just make it look like an autumn tree in general, and I think it turned out really nicely and it gives it a lot of colour. Moving on, the water, I used snot technique and I wanted to do some sort of river as well as some sort of not really cliff face, but more of a hill face up against it. So there is a hill face on the left of the mock, which turned out really nicely. I did add a few little plants around the tree as well as on top of the hill, as well as scattered a couple of mushrooms around, and I think this mock just turned out quite nicely. I really like the tree, and I really like the technique and trying to use this technique in an actual mock. And now we're halfway through the season. This is episode 5. Now, one of you guys actually suggested I do a snow mock down in the comments below, so I actually decided to have a crack at it. This is my snow mock that I've actually tried to do to the best of my ability, and I think it turned out quite nicely. Now, I didn't want to do a plain flat snow mock. I wanted to add a bit of height and a bit of colour in there, so I decided to add a rock face or a cliff face up against one of the corners, which I think turned out quite nicely. Now, I had thought of not adding any figures in this mock, but something a little bit more darker than just a scene. So as you can see, here is a bark speeder which was designed by Brickyard Nation, and there is just a clone helmet next to it. Now this creates a little bit of mystery as to what happened to this clone trooper who was riding the bark speeder, but as you can see, due to the piled snow up around it, it looks like it's been there for a while. So this creates a little bit of mystery and something dark about this entire scene. However, I think this mock turned out really nicely, and it's one of the first mocks where I didn't actually use any figures, and I think it just turned out nicely with the small little rock face. And I did decide to add a couple of icicles on the ground. As you can see, there is some light blue trans pieces which turned out quite nicely, and I really do like this mock, and I thank the person who suggested to me to build this mock. Next, we have episode 6. Now, episode 6 has to be one of my favourite mocks. There's so much going on in this mock, and there's so many different techniques that I used in this mock, and it just looks great in general. So, as you can see, the clones are making a final stand as they retreat from some sort of ruin. I used a lot of smaller pieces to make the brickwork around the archway. I used a really cool technique to make the trees on the left hand side of the mock, and I used a couple of cool little techniques to make all the bushes and all the plants just beneath the trees. Now the pathway itself just looks amazing. There's so many different color contrasts and they just work so well together, and it just pulls the mock together, and it has to be one of my favorite builds that I've done this season, and it just looks so cool in general. Now there is not really many techniques that were used in this mock, however a lot of it is just mainly looks. It just looks so cool, and there isn't really much to say about it. It's not one of the mocks that I've done previously where it's a little bit plain and it's a little bit boring. This mock has a lot of things that are jam-packed into it, and it just looks so nice and so good in general. I love all the color combos that I've used, and I can't just get enough of how good it looks. Next, we're moving on to episode 7, which in my opinion was a bit of a letdown. In this mock, I tried to replicate the first episode of Clone Wars, where the clones and Yoda are being ambushed by the droids, and in my opinion this mock was a letdown because of several things. One, there is not much detail in this mock. 2, there are so many figures in this mock, I feel like the B2s ruin it, because there's just so many of them and it's so crowded and so cramped, it just ruins it a lot, and just not enough detail in general. Yeah, the plants accurately represent what planet they're on, but there's just no detail whatsoever in this mock, and that was my bad, and it is not one of my favourite mocks that I've built so far. Swiftly moving on, this is episode 8. This is also sort of another letdown for me, as this is basically a replica of episode 1, and I basically sort of copied it and reused it, maybe made some modifications and used a couple different techniques, and actually made a battle scene, but in my opinion this one is a little bit of a copy of the first episode. Now there are some different changes, like there is an actual battle going on, as well as the background being changed. So there's actually only one level, however there is a balcony level, and it just looks a bit plain. Like I said, again, I replicated it. It's not anything too fancy, but I did also use some riot shields that I got from the London Brick Festival that I went to. But other than that, this mock is pretty plain, pretty boring. Awesome changes, but there are also some similarities. But other than that, this mock is alright. Second to last, we have episode 9. This mock turned out really nicely. One of the best that I've probably done during this season, and I just love the way it looks, and I love the sort of zen feeling about it. Yeah, the figures are a bit of a letdown, and the actual scene going on in this mock is a bit of a letdown, but the scenery itself, the actual mock itself, looks amazing. I really like the colours, I really like the height differences, and I just love the waterfall and the two rivers. If you haven't checked this video, I highly recommend it. It looks great just with the way everything is just portrayed. Now, if I did a larger version of this mock, I could make it look better. I could add an actual battle scene or something more interesting and something more cool rather than just two clones hopscotching over the river. But other than that, this mock is brilliant, and I'm absolutely loving all the different colours, the textures, and the techniques that I've used. And finally, episode 10. This is the finale of the season, and this has to be one of the coolest and best mocks out of the whole lot. This is a huge cliff face that I built, and it is massive. When I built it, it was really big. It was kind of heavy, and it was very stable as well, surprisingly, which means I could literally pick it up with one hand. Now, with this mock, I really wanted to expand my cliff building skills a lot, so I decided to go all out and build a huge cliff face. This took so much time, so much effort, and I'm so happy with how this one turned out. There is a lot of different techniques that I used in this cliff face. I used a lot of snot, as well as just regular cliff building techniques, but I also decided to use some of the actual LEGO official cliff pieces, just to save on pieces, as well as just for the look, and it turned out quite nicely actually. The plants I absolutely love. It's good colours and good usage of pieces, and it just looks great in general. As you can see, the clones are scaling the mountain and they're trying to ambush the droids, and it just looks so good in general. I cannot get over the fact how cool the plants and the cliff just come together to make a really cool looking mock. And literally all the plants are is yellow trans heads, white teeth, and the green seaweed, and it just turned out so well. And this just has to be one of my favourite mocks out of the entire season, just because of its scale and the way it looks. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been season 2 of the mini mock series. If you did like this video, please like, share and subscribe if you want to see more. There will be a season 3 of the mini mock series, which will be upscaled, which will be bigger and better. Please comment down below if there's anything you want to see in the future, as well as comment down below what your favourite mock from this season was. I also just want to say huge thanks to everyone who has supported this channel, as we're almost at 100 subscribers, which is incredible as I haven't been uploading for that long, which shows how much support you guys have put in. And just want to say thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.